Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Kemet, Blood and Sand. And I recently finished doing my top 100 games, of which the Madago trilogy, Kemet, Cyclades, and Inish, all featured heavily in my top 20 games of all time, as they have for the past 3 years running, because, ever since I've been doing the list, because I love these games. I love this series of games, and with Yucatan, at the time of this filming, currently on Kickstarter, I think, hopefully, depending on when this video goes up, I figured it was time to finally review Kemet. I've reviewed Cyclades in the past, I reviewed Inish in the past, I'll link to those down in the description down below if you want to check those out, but I have yet to review Kemet, primarily because I was waiting for Blood and Sand. There was an original version of Kemet, and I was waiting for this one to come out, and then I played this one, and then I wanted to play with the expansion, which I still haven't done yet, the Sacrificing Necromancer expansion, but I figured it's time to finally go ahead and get this one on video. So, Kemet. This is an area control game. It's an area control game from Madago, an area control game which you're going for generally 8 or 10 points. We usually play the 10-point game, but you're trying to get points in the game primarily through combat and area control. Combat in the sense that you're going to be aggressively punching into other players' units. Whenever you win a combat, whenever you aggressively attack someone and win, you get a point. That's going to drive a lot of the aggression in the game. That concept of turtling, of trying to sit down in your own little continent that you might find in some area control games, is not something you'll find in Kemet. Because of the fact that you get rewarded for punching out, for lashing out. You don't get rewarded for winning a fight. You get a point for starting a fight and attacking and winning a fight. You win a fight as an attacker, that's you get a point, which incentivizes people just clashing out. Combine that with the fact that you also get temporary points. You see, Kemet's going to divide into permanent points and temporary points. Permanent points, as you might imagine, are permanent. They're yours. You get them, you cannot lose them. Temporary points, on the other hand, you can lose. Temporary points are going to come primarily through two different things. First of all is through controlling various temples on the board. Whenever you control a temple, you temporarily hold that point until someone else takes it from you. And the secondly is as you level up your pyramids in the game, you're going to have these little pyramid structures you're trying to build in your own little personal temples over here. As you level up those pyramids, if I can get this going here, you will also earn a temporary point, which gives you an incentive to both build pyramids, as well as to have others take over your pyramids, hence the temporary nature. But going back to those temples, if you, at the end of your turn, hold control over two different temples, if you're here and here, well, you're going to get a permanent point in addition to those two temporary points, which means the combination of the attacking factor of the game, combined with the fact that if a player is holding two temples, they are going to get a permanent point, heavily incentivizes an attack structure in Kemet. This is a game that has a ton of attacking, a ton of jumping into each other's, and that's when we start moving and pivoting into the whole power tiles aspect of the game. This is a good time to point out that I do not have this set up properly. The amount of table space I need is just way too hard to be able to properly do it, so I'm going to do the best I can with over here, and hopefully you get the general gist of things. But let's go ahead to the power tiles. You see, we have these power tiles over here. Now, you won't have all of them in every single game. It depends on the player count you have, as well as potentially the rule set and all that stuff. But basically, you have a whole bunch of power tiles that drive the decisions you make in Kemet. Because these are all very, very pretty. And they all give you things that break the games in different ways, but they all give you different things in different formats. You see over here we have the red power tiles. The red power tiles in this handy dandy little tray are going to give you different ways of being more aggressive in the game. They're going to give you points for attacking. They're going to add more strength to your armies. They're going to give you a variety of creatures. These creatures, you earn them through buying the respective power tiles, and they'll give you tons of ways. You want that creature that when you attack someone, you instantly kill 2 of their units? Well, you'll have to get one of these power tiles. And they come in 4 different rows, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And they each cost more and more as you go down the rows, 1, 2, 3, or 4 respectively. And just as importantly, they require having the associated level of pyramid. You want to buy a level 4 red pyramid, well, a red power tile? Well, you have to have a level 4 red pyramid to match. You need the matching pyramid. You can either own it yourself or temporarily take control of another's. But you're going to be trying to get those pyramids so you can buy the power tiles, because the power tiles are awesome and they're cool and they let you do things. Like I said already, the red heavily leans into the aggression of the game, trying to give you ways and reasons to attack others and to just be generally stronger. The blue, no, we're up to the white, my bad. The white over here, the white's primarily going to focus on the economy of the game. You have Ankh, your prayer points that you're going to be spending in the game, that you're going to be tracking on your little player boards. You're going to be spending them. You can have up to 11 at any given point, but you're going to want to spend them on things like raising your pyramids, on things like buying power tiles, and adding new units to the board. And so you need an economy in the game, and that economy will primarily, but not exclusively, come through these white power tiles. You see, you can have various tiles that decrease the cost of buying power tiles. You can have power tiles that give you more Ankh every time you pick a prey action. You can have things that give you more money every night. You see, Kemet is divided into a day-night cycle. And every night you get a little extras. You get some divine intervention cards, which are basically power cards that will help you. You get the Ankh that you need. You activate a variety of night-based powers, different things like that, as you reset for the next round, reset turn order, stuff like that. But then a whole bunch of these will give you things. You want extra power tiles during the night? You can have that. Again, you want to buy creatures, various creatures that will, not that one over here, this one over here. You want to buy various creatures that will give you extra things during the night. You'll have that as well. Want extra power tiles, want extra economy, want to level up your pyramid every single night. The economy of the game is primarily driven through the white tiles. From there we have the blue tiles, which focus heavily on defense. The blue tiles focus on defense in a variety of ways, including the ability to start gaining points as the defender of a battle. Win a battle as the person being attacked, and you have the right power tile, and you can start getting points, which suddenly gives other players a reason to think through whether it's worth attacking or not. You see, Kemet in general rewards the aggressor. It is worth it for me to attack you, and even if I lose a few units. It's not nearly as problematic or punishing as you gaining a point, but that can change with this. Combine that with a bunch of other factors that protect your troops, keep them alive, allow you to add extra units to your troops, or even the creature down here that straight up gives you an extra point as well. We have the Sphinx over here, which will give you an extra point in addition to, well, giving you strength or movement or all these things. And the general concept of monsters is monsters will link to a troop in the game, and they'll match up with the troop and give that troop extra modifiers, extra attack, extra strength, extra defense, extra movement, extra abilities in the game. And then from there we have the Necromancer tiles over here. The Necromancer, I don't know if they're officially called Necromancers. This was originally the Cthulhu-esque faction, and you could have gotten the Cthulhu stuff for it, but these are a bunch of tiles that reward sacrifice. I have not played with these yet, so if you're looking for an opinion on these, sadly, I don't have them yet. I want to. I need to dive into it, but I didn't want to hold off on this review forever. Maybe I'll do a dedicated review for that when I eventually dive into them. But they focus heavily on sacrifice, the idea of giving up and trading off sacrificial stuff in order to get more perks in the game. And then we have the black tiles, which are kind of a jack-of-all-trades situation. They give you a little bit of everything, a little bit of economy, a little bit of attack, a little bit of creatures, a little bit of defense, a little bit of everything in here. This is a good catch-all system over here as you try to build those up. Not being particularly aggressive or amazing at any one of them, but all giving you different things. And again, the power tiles in the game drive the entire core engine. They drive everything. They drive the fun of the game because each of those, may not have been evident from the way I was holding them, there's only one of every tile. Now, there are some duplicates across the different ranges, so some of the tiles have like 2, but when I show you 16 tiles, there are 16 tiles. The occasional duplicate here and there will not take away from the fact that most of the time, players are trying to choose what they want and mentally build up the pathway of how they're going to develop their asymmetrical faction. You see, the game starts with you being completely the same as everyone else. But throughout the course of your actions, you will have developed asymmetry. You will have a faction that is different, that is special, that is broken in its own unique special ways that no one else has the same. But that involves trying to chase down your own power trees, trying to chase down your own power tiles, trying to find the combinations. If I get this red one, that blue one, and that black one, that's going to be an awesome combination, but somebody else might take one of those tiles first, and so it's a constant game of just trying to add to how good your faction is, both in combat, in economy, in defense, in everything that the game is doing, and these drive the entire reason why Kemet is such a good game. The concept of dropping into others, of trying to collide with others, of having a bunch of units on the board and marching into another space and simply having a battle, that doesn't do it for me. That's just area control, which I like, but I need something else surrounding it, and for me, it's the power tiles of Kemet. It's the idea that when I walk in, I know that I have an advantage that you don't. Or alternatively, and this is where we can talk about the Divine Intervention cards, maybe you have a Divine Intervention card that I don't know about. You see, these are part of the economy of the game. Every night you're going to get Ankh, which is your currency that you can spend. But you're also going to get these. You're also going to get these Divine Intervention cards that give you different abilities. Anything from voiding a combat entirely, from retreating, from giving you extra money, from giving you extra modifiers to your combat strength, modifiers that the other player can't perfectly predict, even though they think they have the best combat card for you. You see, combat in Kemet is basically combining the strength of your units, the strength of any associated creatures, all the abilities as well, so extra attack, defense, whatnot, and then from your hand of cards, picking one of the cards you think is most likely to win. All players have the same starting hand of cards, and that will change as you start playing through battle because you don't get them back until you're done with them, but you'll start with the same starting hand of different combat cards that give you different modifiers. Modifiers such as increased strength, which will win the battle. Modifiers such as increased attack, which won't help you win, but will be bloodthirsty and take out your opponents. Or modifiers such as defense, that will keep your units alive, and so you're playing this mind game of trying to think through, what am I trying to do right now? Am I trying to win? Am I trying to inflict mass casualties? Or am I trying to keep myself alive? Or is there some combination, because there's different combinations on these cards, is there some combination that will work best for me? And or can I combine that with Divine Intervention cards that will modify, adding increased attack, increased defense, increased whatever to those cards? Such that it doesn't matter the fact that you're marching into battle with that elephant, I'm still going to be able to do stuff to you. I'm still going to be able to hurt you because you don't know what's coming. And that combat system of Kemet is a little bit of a bluffing game at times, because sometimes there is the defined win. I can guarantee the win if I play my 4-strength card, but I know that you know that. And so because I know that you know that, you're probably going to play something weaker that focuses on defense. And because you're playing something weaker that focuses on defense, I don't want to waste my 4, so I'll play something that is weaker that focuses on defense instead as well, to keep my people alive. But then you know that that's possible, so maybe you actually do go high. There's a little bit of a, the Divine Adventure cards always add a degree of uncertainty to the mix. But past that, there is a degree of being able to mostly math out how a combat will play out. But the mathing out only takes you as far as the card that's actually played, which changes the whole entire conversation around what's actually happening and how that combat will prevail. Kemet is a game in which you take action after action to buy power tiles, to crash into others, to attack others on this map. The movement of the map, by the way, it's not evident from the board in general, but everything is identically distant to one another. The way the board is structured, the way every individual city is structured, everything has an identical amount of distance to everything relative. It doesn't mean that everything is exactly equidistant to each other, but it does mean that regardless of what city you take, you are equidistant to all the other cities, you are equidistant to all the other main points of contact in the game. And the core structure of actions is you have a bunch of actions that have to go onto this little board over here. What you're going to do is you're going to grab your action tiles, you're going to grab your little markers over here, and you're going to have to assign them to various actions as you play, ensuring that you hit actions on every single row. So you have your little Ankh marker over there, you have a bunch of actions, 5 actions, if I can get these little tiles over here, there we go. So you have 5 actions in the game, and you can earn extra actions, and on a turn, you're going to go ahead and assign an action to something. Maybe I'm taking 2 prayer points over there, maybe I'm taking 2 currency, maybe I'm recruiting more units, or moving across the board, or leveling up my pyramid so I can start buying new power tiles, or, depending on which power tiles are in the game, we'll have these little markers over here, or buying a black power tile over there. Now in general, every single action of the game you can only take once per token, which means that you're trying to think through, I can only buy 1 red power tile this turn, I can only buy 1 blue, which one do I want this turn? Next turn, I can get another, maybe, and then also there's a black power tile that lets you potentially get another one at an increased cost, other things, everything in this game lets you break something else. But then, that's basically it. Take your actions, map out your attacks, figure out your pathway to the power tiles you want, figure out your pathway to the 10 points you need in the game, from building your pyramids, from taking over temples, from engaging in combats, from buying certain power tiles that will give you points. These over here, there's one in every color, this will give you a point. Plus there's one in the blue that will give you another point. So you have a bunch of opportunities to gain points from these alone. There's a ton of ways to try to win in Kemet, and they all involve powers and abilities. The pathway you take is up to you. But there's a lot of fun to be had along the way. Which brings us to the review part of Kemet. This is all just the how to play, sort of, as much as I possibly could with this. Which brings us to the review part of Kemet. And it should be obvious from the very beginning, I love this game, which isn't really a surprise. You can skip to the whole final thoughts or whatever it is, or we can go into what I like about Kemet and why it's one of my favorite games, why it has consistently been in my top 20 every single year. And to start off with, the most obvious, if you've been watching my channel at all, is powers and abilities. Kemet gives you powers and abilities left, right, and center. There are so many ways to just break the game. I love it when a game gives you the freedom to just break it. When the game doesn't worry about measuring up, well, this will give you +2, that will give you -2, and therefore here is a perfectly constructed ability that is well balanced within the scope of the game. I mean, that's nice, it's good, I like many games that do that, but I like the games that almost say, screw it, forget it. Here's a whole smorgasbord of options, and we'll just ensure the fact that everything is so crazily broken that you will want everything. Sure, that's more broken than that, but it also costs more, so it'll take you a little more time to get to that. And then they're all broken in different ways, and the powers and abilities are just so ridiculously fun. I use the term broken casually, and others may have a problem with the term broken. I don't know if Kemet's broken, I just know that things feel overpowered, but everything feels overpowered, and you all have equal access to the things that feel overpowered, so it's broken? Question mark? I don't really know, but then the developed asymmetry really helps as well. See, I always like powers and abilities to begin with, but I like powers and abilities more when they're applied to making me feel special. If we both have tons of fun things we can do, that's awesome, but if I can take that fun thing and now I'm different than you, I'm special, I'm unique. I've always wanted to be special and different and unique, and now in Kemet I can be, and I can pursue those pathways that let me feel like I have better access to stuff than you do. And you'll feel the same way, you see, because I have an economy that rewards me every single night. Every single time I take an action, I get extra prayer points, I do what I need to do. All those things are excellent and awesome, and I feel more powerful than you. Then you crash into my units with your creature and insta-kill 2 of my units, and you feel more powerful and different than special than me. Kemet allows the players at the table to constantly feel like they have a unique advantage that other players don't, and it feels that way because it's true. You all do have that developed asymmetry, that idea of just being able to be completely different and unique and have power at your fingertips. Kemet gives you that promise, that potential. It gives you the cool feeling of the powers and abilities in the game. And the combat point system in the game drives an aggressive stance. In area control games in general, going back to the age-old days of Risk, the original area control game I played, the original Dudes in a Map game I played, Risk had the problem of turtling, the idea of sitting tight. And even area control games nowadays sometimes have that. Even Cyclades or Inish to a certain degree has a degree of focus on the defense, of focus on holding your land. And while that's nice, and while when done well, that can certainly be structured to still provide an amazing experience. I do love Cyclades and Inish. But at the end of the day, there's something not magical, freeing. There's something freeing about the idea of a game that sits there and says, you want to sit tight? By all means, you will lose the game, I guarantee it. Or you can charge into battle left, right, and center. You can charge into battle and attack others. You can get those victory points. You can lose that battle. That's fine. It's okay. Spend that battle inflicting mass casualties on your opponent, and then spend the next battle actually attacking them and winning. You can sit there and try to incentivize yourself to push forward towards those permanent victory points, because the temporary points are temporary. Don't get me wrong, holding on to 3 pyramids and 2 temples at the end of the game is 5 points towards the victory. But for the first 5 rounds of the game, it doesn't matter at all because it doesn't help you win. It only matters in the last round. And so aggressively pursuing those permanent points early on in the game gives you a strong incentive to simply not turtle. And then the temples. The temples give you economy in the game. I mentioned the fact that holding a temple early in the game gives you a temporary point that's useless until late game. That's true, but it's also going to reward you with 3 Ankh throughout the night. So it has that area control incentive too. It has the area control, it has the aggression, it has the powers and abilities. And then the creatures. I mean, these technically fall under the whole powers and abilities. Every single creature in the game is basically linked to a power tile, and they all go with your troops on the board. You're going to have two generally you have 2 troops on the board. Sometimes you can have 3. It depends on what you're going for, how you're trying to pursue things. But each creature can be linked to a single troop. And that gives that troop that additional incentive. And it just feels, again, powerful and fun to have your creatures marching around the board. And then to take that snake, where you'll simply ignore the other player's powers, because the snake will negate all other creatures' powers, which is its own ridiculous form of counter power in its own way. You have that level 4 creature that's really awesome, and you're going to do something bad to me? Well, I have this level 2 much cheaper snake, and you can't do anything to me. There's a lot to like in Kemet. But there are things to not like as well, and this is where I'm actually going to divide my feedback up into the original Kemet and the new Kemet, because it depends on what you're doing. The original Kemet rule set, I think, had one thing that was a potential problem, one potential issue, and that has been fixed in Kemet Blood and Sand, or, if you're interested, it has been fixed in whatever downloadable file you can find of the new rules and apply it to your old version of Kemet. But it's the idea of the last turn advantage in the game. Kemet in general has a strong, the person who goes last has an advantage. The person who goes last in any turn, in any round, can see what's happening and react accordingly. Oh, congratulations, you've all sat there and fought it out? Great. I'm now going to walk into that spot and take it from you, and you can't do anything. The round is over. It has that last turn advantage, which any individual round is its own problem, but then the game accommodates for that by rearranging turn order and keeping it consistent so it's not a problem round to round. It is a problem when it's the end of the game. The original Kemet had the potential and the promise for players to go on these last turn rampages that had no consequence because it was the last turn of the game. And that definitely was a problem. It never fully detracted from my enjoyment, but certainly was a problem. That has been fixed in, well, Kemet Blood and Sand, or the Kemet Blood and Sand rule set, so it's not nearly as much of an issue, or potentially even an issue at all. It really hasn't been an issue for us since we've been playing with that new rule set. It potentially still has the taste of the issue while being different, but they've mostly fixed or addressed it. Which brings me to the things I don't like about Blood and Sand, specifically this reprint version, which are nitpicks to be very clear, but nonetheless they are things I don't like. First of all, is I don't love the new graphical design overhaul. While most of the improvements, and I will get into the differences between Kemet and Blood and Sand towards the end of this, but most of the improvements I think of as improvements. At the end of the day, I got rid of my original Kemet, and I have kept Blood and Sand because I think it is the better game system. Not by huge amounts, but by enough so that I do want this for one of my favorite games of all time. But the things I don't like about Blood and Sand, the first of all, is the fact, like I said already, I find a lot of the graphical overhauls lose some of the charm of the original Kemet. Perhaps they're easier to read, I don't know. I never had a problem with the original Kemet, but I find some of the graphical changes just don't feel as nice. It feels pulled back and less full of, I don't know, the charm of the original design. And then secondly, and this part I really don't like, but I technically have to hold on to my opinion as a reservations until, well, time will tell, but we have these map overlays on the board. These little tiles over here that go on the board, blocking various spots, and Well, depending on the player count, you're going to have one or both of them in play. Now, the thing I really don't like about this is I kind of understand the need for it to a small degree. I wish they had done double-sided boards, had a different way of figuring it out. I don't love having these overlays. They're not particularly pretty, and I don't love them. I don't love them. But what I find particularly annoying is one of them is there just because of the fact that you don't have the 6-player fictional non-existent expansion. There's an expansion coming for Kemet Blood and Sand at some point. I don't know when, I don't know how, but they built the map around the idea of a future expansion. So this base game I bought has an overlay that sticks on the board because there's a future expansion coming. I don't love that idea from a game design standpoint. It's practical to a degree, but I don't ever plan on playing Kemet with 6. I don't even love playing Kemet with 5. To me, 4 is the ideal player count. I'm realizing now I skipped the whole player count conversation, which we'll, I guess, come to shortly. But for me, Kemet is best at 3 and 4. It's a 2 to 5 player game, best at 3 and 4 in my opinion. Interaction is incredibly high, but because it's best at 3 and 4, I don't even want to play it with 5, let alone 6, and now I just have these overlays. I kind of wish I could just have a board that was designed for the player count I want, because as it is, not a huge fan of them. Again, these are nitpicks, to be sure, in a game that I otherwise love, but nitpicks nonetheless. As far as things I can see others not liking, there's a lot more here, and this is where Kemet may or may not be the right game for you. First of all, it's about as conflict-heavy as you can get. If any form of conflict is not for you, I don't know how you made it this far into this review. This is an area control, dudes in a map game, which the entire point of the game is to aggressively attack into one another and keep doing that until the game is over, and so if conflict is not your thing, this is not a game for you. Secondly is the perception of brokenness. I love that perception of brokenness. I love the idea that different power tiles are just differently broken. That I sit there and look and say, these are all incredible and I want them all, and you got that one and I got this one. But then you'll have another player who looks at that and says, but you got the broken-er one and I got just the broken one. And so that perception of brokenness can certainly mess with you if it's something you don't love. If you like that tweaked balance of economy and this rewards that and that gives you that, this is not the game for you. Those power tiles will seem broken, but hopefully equally broken in a way that is, well, ridiculously fun. And the combat mechanism. Playing cards and trying to think through, if I do this, you do that, and if you do this, I do that. It does mean that a player who plays it safe all the time, who maths out the perfect prediction, is more likely to win in any given battle, but they run the risk of giving up their cards when it's safe to do so. There is a degree of reward in the bluffing of a card play, in the bluffing of combat, and trying to sit there and say, I know my 4 can win, and so do you, so I'm playing my 1, knowing that you're playing your 1 too. It can reward you for taking those risks. The problem is, it can punish you for taking those risks too, and so a player who's willing to take those risks and win will potentially have more 4s to play every round because they didn't play their 4 until they needed to. They kept not playing their 4 so they could play the 4 when they really wanted to. And so that combat mechanism, that bluffing mechanic, even for myself, it's a one that I found that in some games I don't like it, in some games I do. In Kemet I do. And I think that's partially because of the unknown divine intervention cards. Because of the fact that there's always unknown and it's never a perfect prediction, there's more incentive to actually sit there and play your 4 when relevant, because even if other factors are at play, you can still get messed over with the DI cards. And so I think because of the lack of perfect information, the bluffing works for me. But it might not work for you, as it hasn't worked for me in other games. And then lastly, and this is one that's definitely worth calling out, is tracking other players' powers. With at any given point, you generally have a minimum of 48 power tiles on the table at any given point, possibly more, depending on the player count you're playing at. But that does mean that as players grab these power tiles, trying to see what that player has or that player has can be a bit of a work of looking across the table. Now, what I do recommend, what we do in our group, is we do separate attack-based power tiles and economy-based power tiles. Anything that's attack-based, we have in our own little pile, because that's the thing you really need to know about. It's not that important that you know that I get 2 extra prayer points whenever I take a prey action. It's not that important. But it's very important that you know that I get 1 extra defense and 2 extra attack in every combat. And so we separate those, which results in a smaller pile, but nonetheless there is a degree of tracking that developed asymmetry. There's a degree of trying to see, okay, if I'm about to engage with combat with you, I need to know that I actually have what it takes to win, and so you have to be cognizant of the other player's combat tiles, which is a little bit of work. And it gets better and easier as you know the game, but it can be a little bit of work. Before we get into final thoughts and rating, just general talking about changes to the original game, Kemet Blood and Sand comes to the table with a few different things. First of all, it comes to the table with a new expansion. Just that whole entirely new faction of power tiles, which I want to dive into. I haven't yet, so I don't have a strong opinion, but it does come to the table with that. It also comes to the table with, and this depends on where you get it, or if you get these extra packs, but it comes to the table with some extra monsters that were introduced as well throughout the course of the Kickstarter campaign that come in the game packs or whatever. They have a system for what they call them, but you can get those as well, so that's another thing it comes to the table with. comes to the table with new rules, a new rule set that tweaks the original Kemet, but you could download those yourself and use them in your own copy of Kemet. You don't need this for that. So if it's just the new rules you're after, which I do think are an improvement over the original, although I never had that much of a problem with the original. Again, the original was always a game I loved, and the new one I just love anyway. So the rules don't, to me, drastically make the game better, but I do recommend downloading them and printing them out if you have the original Kemet. I think they are a slight improvement to the rules. It's also worth noting that this Kemet comes included with the black power tiles, which are part of the Tassetti expansion. The Tassetti expansion of the original Kemet gave you priests, which most people didn't, I shouldn't say most people, which a lot of people didn't really use. And so when they put together Blood and Sand, they included the black power tiles, which was a whole new section of power tiles that players can have and did use and enjoy, and they kind of just left the priest off to the side as an expansion faction thing that was never really utilized. I never really used it myself, and I think a lot of people did not, and so that's worth noting as well. Then, as far as quality of life improvements, first of all, it comes with these little obelisks. They're fine. They're not particularly impressive. So, I mean, if you paint them, maybe it's a different conversation. But they're nice. And again, I don't necessarily know if they come with the standard base game. I got this on Kickstarter Pledge. So, I don't know all the differences of what you have to get separately. It comes today with these trays. These are a huge quality of life adjustment. I think these are insanely worth it. And if you don't have these, look on Etsy for something that will hold your original Kemet tiles, because having to set these up and track these every single game is a pain. Having these trays over here makes everything significantly easier as far as the general accessibility of the game. And speaking of which, while in the original Kemet, I did have multiple sheets over here, because these are little pamphlets that players can have, where it shows you all the power tiles, all the DI cards. Granted, these will be defunct and useless as soon as there's another expansion, although hopefully they print a whole bunch of them. But this is something where I always had printed out extra copies so that every player at the table can have one, but it is nice to have a, actual physical pamphlet as opposed to a printed out PDF. So I do like the fact that this comes with enough of these for all the other players. And then lastly, it cleaned up and changed, or not lastly, two things. It cleaned up and changed the iconography, which for me is a step backwards. And then it has these pyramids over here, as opposed to the dice. The original Kemet had these rotating dice, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the top. And I don't know which one I like better. I like them both. These are nice. They're very pyramid looking, but the original dice also have their own sort of charm to it. And so that's kind of I'm fine with either one of those. But those are the primary differences. Some quality of life things, some extra content, and some streamlined rules, which you can get either way. Which brings us to final thoughts and rating. Kemet's a 5 out of 5 for me. There's no hiding that. This has been in my top 20 for 3 years running. And when I say 3 years running, I've only been doing a top whatever in the past 3 years, and so it's only had the opportunity to be there. In fact, Kemet was a 5 out of 5 for me for my very first play. Now, of course, I needed more plays to cement that. My very first play of Kemet was everything that I loved about this genre. It's that powers and abilities, the developed asymmetry, the crashing into one another, the aggression, the brokenness. Everything is what I like in these games. I've never loved area control for the sake of area control alone. I've loved area control when you build other things around the premise and you give me other reasons to engage with it, and Kemet does that. It gives me tons of reasons to engage. Every time I dive into Kemet, I mentally chart out a new pathway because I like the exploration of something new. I like trying a new pattern. I've never really used, some of these tiles are fairly standard. Like, you get a discount on all the power tiles you buy. That's excellent. What if I forget that? And what if my first purchase instead is a level 3 white power tile, which you can do if you plan your turn properly. And so trying to chart your game around new pathways, new options, new movements forward every single time you play gives you a whole different incentive structure. What if you get that incredibly aggressive level 3 red creature on your first turn? While other players are building up your economy, you spend your first turn crashing into others and taking them down. Lock in 2 or 3 permanent points on your first turn of the game while other players are building up your economy. Sure, you'll have to fight an uphill battle the rest, but you have an uphill battle with 3 permanent points under your umbrella already. And so there's so many different pathways to pursue. There's so many different options on the table. There's a ton of variability in the game, a ton of powers and abilities. It is everything I like in this genre. Kemet is an amazing game. It's one that I have always enjoyed from my very first play. It is one that has not really diminished. It's dropped a little bit in the rankings just because of the relative plays, the amount of plays I've had this game, and other games that fall into this area control, powers and abilities genres. But like I said, dropping in the rankings is one conversation. It has not dropped remotely out of a 5 out of 5 since my first play. I've loved it then, I love it now, and I'm very excited about it. Always, still, clearly. As far as other game recommendations, if you're looking for other games, first of all, Blood Rage. I find Kemet and Blood Rage give me very similar feelings of the developed asymmetry, of the aggressive pushes towards conflict because of the way it rewards it. I find both of them fall into a very similar spots. I love them both. But Blood Rage and Kemet to me feel fairly similar. And then secondly, And this is worth noting because of Yucatan. Yucatan is a game that should currently be on Kickstarter at the time of this filming, or if you're watching this in the far distant future, maybe you can buy it at retail, I don't really know. But Yucatan is from the designers of Kemet, and it's the 4th game in the quadrilogy, I guess, from Kemet, Inish, Cyclades, and now Yucatan. And Yucatan really takes a lot of the core combat principles of Kemet and distills it into just much more heavily focused combat. If you like all the powers and combat and all stuff aspects of Kemet, and you want to see it done in a different fashion, then Yucatan will very much deliver that. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, have a good one.